Hey, it's Mr. Allred, and we're still talking about percents. What we have here is the percent change formula, and it has two parts to it. One is kind of like an intermediate step, which is the absolute change, which this measures how something changes over time. So in general, there's a starting amount, and then there's an ending amount, and that is subtracted to figure out the difference. The percent change takes into account that difference and divides it by the starting amount. So that gives you a fraction that turns into a decimal, and then if you want to write it as a percent, we can multiply it by 100 or move that decimal two places. So the percent change formula down here, the way I have it written is larger amount minus smaller amount. That's the absolute change up here. Okay, so that top part there, ooh, come on buddy, that is the absolute change. Now I write it that way because we could subtract them either way, but if we know that the quantity got bigger over time, we can just do it this way and call it a percent increase. If we know it got smaller over time, we could do it this way and call it a percent decrease. So instead of using a positive and a negative to tell us which way it went, we can just use the words increase or decrease. The main thing here is that you're always going to look at it as a timetable. There's a start and a stop, and that denominator of the percent change formula is always the starting amount or the original amount. So think about it, our problem in chronological order, and look for what happened first when you put it on the bottom. So, example. Over 4 years, a local community college's enrollment increased from 1,245 to 635. Okay, so it increased. Calculate the absolute change and the percent change. So we can look at the absolute change. And say that's going to be the difference between these two numbers, 1635 minus 1245. Calculator says that is 390. So we increased the number of students at our school by 390. Well, think about it in perspective. If we started with 1,000 students and we increased it by about 400, that's a good bit. If we started with 1,000,000 students and increased it by 400, that's not all that significant. So the percent change is going to show you how large that change is relative to the starting amount. So let's see here, percent change. Will be this 390 over the original. So it increased from 1245. And when we're done, we're going to multiply it by 100 to get a percent. And it says round your percent to the nearest tenth. So my 390 divided by 1245 gives me 0.31325. Okay, I'm going to move that decimal over 2, so I'll have 31 point, when I round it, 3. 31.3%. So our enrollment increased by around a third in this scenario. Okay. Let's see what the next problem is. A car dealership was selling a new model for $25,495. Because they were selling so fast, the manager decided to raise the price to $28,250. Calculate the percent increase to the nearest tenth of a percent. Okay, so let's see here. So let's do our percent change. And let's just do it in one big formula. So it didn't ask us to find the absolute change by itself. So we'll do the larger number minus the smaller number. And after we subtract that, we're going to divide it by the starting amount. So it started off being 25,495. Okay, so we raised it from 25,000 to 28,000. We're going to write that as a percent, so times 100%. and it says to the nearest tenth. So let's do some work here. 28,250 minus 25,495, and we'll write that as 2,755 over 25,495 times 100%. So just in case you don't put things in correctly, sometimes people try and do too much. Let's see. Divided by 25,495, and then we will move that decimal 2 places by multiplying by 100. I'm getting 10.8%. So he increased the price that he was charging for the car by almost $3,000, and that was around 10 to 11% increase. Okay. The last example in this, gas prices dropped from 1 week to the next from $1.96 to $1.74 per gallon. Calculate the percent decrease to the nearest percent. So again, we're going straight for the percent change. I mean, somewhere in there we do calculate the absolute change, but we'll take the bigger number, $1.96 minus $1.74, and that'll be times 100%. But what did it start off as? It went from $1.96, okay, to $1.74. So the bottom isn't talking about which one's bigger or smaller, it's talking about the chronological order of where did it start. Okay. So let's do this. $1.96 minus $1.74. That gives me 22 cents divided by $1.96. And I'll multiply that by 100. I'm getting 11. I said to the nearest percent, I get 11%. So it's very important to read what we're told to round to. The other two were to the nearest tenth. This one says to the nearest percent. All right, let's stop there with percents.